What is an affordance-driven creature? A good example is a hungry bee, whose eyes spot a flower immersed in a complex background. Immediately, a bell rings inside its brain, awaking deep motivations, which may in turn drive the animal into new behaviors. How can we engineer a robot, which interacts with its visual environment, similar to a real bee? To analyze this, we have to understand some of the principles behind the pattern recognition capacities of the insect's brain. Insect brains are about 1 million times smaller than ours, and yet, they can learn through symbolic language and transfer these memories to specific spatial abilities. Due to its relatively simple structure, the olfactory systems in particular have been carefully analyzed. In the insect olfactory system, pattern memorization and recognition is carried out by the cooperation of two clue elements, the antennal lobe, or AL, and the mushroom body, or MB. These elements talk through special channels, where data is scarce. The AL pre-processes raw information, taken from primary olfactory receptors, and produces pre-packed files, where implicit space-time relations are encoded and averaged. This data is called time-stabilized sparse code, or TSS code. The TSS code is a kind of highly condensed, informative bulletin, where objects are represented by the strong activation of a few neurons. This bulletin has spatiotemporal relations, woven by the highly specialized AL, which follows its own weaving rules. The MB is the combination of the hippocampus and the cortex of mammals. It is responsible for cognitive duties and, inside it, pattern memorization and recognition are carried out by using the informative bulletin produced by the AL. In the MB, patterns are memorized as variations in synaptic weights. It is also here where patterns are later on recognized as the activation of specific neurons. Both of these cognitive actions utilize TSS code as their main information source. It is experimentally demonstrated that the MB can memorize and recognize an odor pattern in an isolated way, that is, without ever be presented with any other odor's counterexamples. The only requirement is for valid TSS code to be available. Our robot observes the world through a 2-axis moving webcam. Some images afford painting and activate the effector P. Some others afford cutting and activate the effector C. The visual inputs are different classes of untailored 2D and 3D image. To adapt insect brain mechanism to our robot, we will consider the controller design. First, we build an artificial L, where primary receptors are the pixels of a 100 by 100 image, representing a moving region of interest, simplified with canny edge detection. Secondly, we define an MB, consisting of many small neural networks, called isolated tunable agents or ITAs. These agents are responsible for learning and recognition, and they utilize as their only input the synthetic TSS code produced by the EL. When learning to recognize objects, ITAs behave as autocritical individuals, using 2 rules. Rule 1. Look to the outside world. See the object for a while, and use backpro to learn to fire with the object and partially forget what you have learned somewhere else. Rule 2. Look inside yourself. See your own noise source for a while. Use backpro to learn not to fire with noise, and partially forget what you have learned somewhere else. Notice that acquiring noise immunity requires sacrificing some knowledge. Using these rules, a reward R is defined as a short learning experience, where one chosen ITEA receives 100 backpro cycles watching the object, followed by 100 cycles watching noise. In our current serial programming, a reward lasts about 2 seconds. After about 5 rewards, the selected ITEA learns to fire with the object, and not to fire with noise. It also develops an emergent behavior, which distinguishes the memorized object from many others unknown objects or backgrounds, no matter how complex they look. Through or like operators, ITAs outputs are grouped into cognitive strings. The idea is to expand object recognition into class recognition by devoting several ITAs to the identification of one object, which changes in size, rotation and internal shape. Inside a cognitive string, the ITAs work as a cooperative society, where the individuals are numerated from 1 to n. For learning purposes they are self-activated, according to a strict sequence, beginning with the first, then the second and so on. At any time, only the active idea in the string is habilitated to receive rewards. After about 10 rewards, this individual freezes its weights and activates the next idea, thus protecting valuable knowledge and opening new fresh learning resources. Through accumulative learning, it becomes possible to dedicate a whole string to the invariant recognition of one object that changes in size, rotation and internal shape. This requires extended training and multiple, selective rewards.
Experiment 1, the emergence of affordance perception. We want the robot to develop perception of affordance for two classes of objects, class P represented by brushes which afford painting, and class C represented by scissors, which afford cutting. These classes were chosen since physical samples of them were available, and they both represent difficult to recognize items, very sensitive to rotational translation. One cognitive string was dedicated to perceive affordances for painting, and one for cutting. In the figure, the controller converts original images into canny images and synthetic TSS code. Inside the ITS, and after 4 rewards, time-stabilized sparse features are created in their hidden layer. Using Pentium Core i5, learning takes about 10 seconds. Once trained for classes recognition, the robot visually scans the shown landscape, and in about 3 minutes, perceives the 8 existing affordances. Image zooming is tolerated, and look-alike objects such as pliers and relays are rejected. Experiment 2, a non-easily distractible eye. To test the global perception of affordances, the robot is set to explore the Caltech 101 dataset. After examining more than 9,000 images, in 5 hours the 9 mistaken look-alike elements shown in the figure are reported. The robot also recognizes 31 out of 39 true affordances in the scissor category. To achieve this goal, minor image resizing was required. The other image processing duties were all done by the neural controller itself, without outside intervention.
The robot shows a robust affordance perception capacity. For the whole Caltech dataset, the error is limited to 0.098%. In theory, this can be further improved by adding ITS to the string, as to cover more tilting, zooming and resolution for each desired affordance. A credible perception of affordance requires a prolonged learning period, which in turn involves a space-time distribution of pre-packed learning resources. A substantial exposition to multiple training examples and situations is also needed. We have developed and tested a robotic vision system capable of showing clear relations between affordances and perception action under broad visual conditions. After training, the robot behaves as a dependable, affordance-driven creature. Although there is still a long way to go, we have shown at a small scale that insects' brain principles are good nominees to design robots with practical, affordance-perceiving abilities. Thanks for your attention.